families from the bottom rung should leave. The meat will taste bad. At a fancy steakhouse, when my daughter Jessica ordered cheaper meat, a banker at the next table started to pick on her. Her name is Julie Robinson, and we've had run-ins with her before. At the height of my anger, I decided to make a significant decision. My name is Michelle Stevens. I'm turning 50 this year, and I'm a part-time working housewife. Due to being born to a father who loved collecting paintings, our family home was adorned with many artwork. I believe my dad often talked about paintings even during dinner, mentioning things like, the use of color in that painting is exceptional. IT artist who drew that was struggling in life back then, and it reflects in the art. Given the environment I grew up in, it wouldn't have been surprising if I had become an artist, but sadly, I had no talent in drawing. In my report cards, I always scored a C in art, and even now, I don't get the appeal of abstract paintings. However, my dad never discouraged me and told me to do what you love, so I studied economics in college. I met my current husband in college, and we got married when I was 25. Just a year after our marriage, Jessica was born. This life event led me to quit my job back then and fully focus on raising her. Once Jessica started elementary school and didn't need constant care, I started my part-time job. While my husband had a good income, I wanted to set an example for her by working as well. Fortunately, Jessica grew up well and is now a 24-year-old hardworking professional. She seems to face various challenges at work, but is leading a lively life. Jessica loves steak, and about once a month, she, my husband, and I visit a fancy steakhouse. I also love meat, so I always look forward to our steak outings. When I lost both my parents around 2 years ago, going out for steak somewhat lightened my sorrow. Today as well, I've made lunch plans with Jessica to go to a fancy steakhouse. It's a weekday afternoon, but Jessica happened to have the day off, and I didn't have work either. My husband couldn't join us because he's on an extended business trip, but that's alright. Once he's back, we'll plan another outing with the three of us. As lunchtime approached, Jessica and I headed to our favorite steakhouse and immediately started browsing the menu upon being seated. This restaurant is top tier, so the beef is of course delicious. However, their pork and chicken are equally tasty. The pork and chicken are also cheaper compared to beef, so we end up ordering them often. This time too, Jessica said, "I'll have the pork ribs and the juicy chicken, please." Of course, we didn't just order that. We also got beef and rice soon after our orders started arriving in Jessica, and I eagerly began grilling. As we relished the meal, we finished the meat in no time. We thought of ordering some more, but then from the table across the aisle we heard a weird chuckling sound. Wondering what was going on, we turned to see a middle-aged, somewhat chubby woman giggling at us. "Excuse me, is there a problem?" I asked, only to have the woman laugh even more. "Well, it's just funny you come to such a fancy steak place and ordered cheap pork and chicken." She had been observing what we were eating. It felt invasive and uncomfortable. What we chose to eat is our business. We happen to like pork and chicken. Though I found her very rude, I tried to ignore her and focused back on the menu, but the woman from the next table wouldn't stop bothering us. "Pork and chicken, isn't that just bland when there's delicious beef available? I can't understand why anyone would be so obsessed with pork and chicken. Your meat is burning." I pointed to the ladies' table. Personal. "Oh no, it really is." Jessica quickly grabbed the tongs on the grill. An expensive-looking piece of meat was charred black. Julie was making a face, probably thinking it was because she was bothering us. I totally believed this was Julie's fault, but after moving the meat to her plate, she glared at us sharply. "It's because of you two. The best meat in this place is ruined. This was the most expensive one. What are you gonna do about it?" "What can we do?" I thought. "How about ordering a new piece?" I suggested hesitantly, but that only made Julie angrier. "It was your fault that the meat got ruined. Why should I have to pay out of pocket and order again?" Julie's anger seemed to be escalating, and she finally said, "Get out of this restaurant. Hey, this is a high-end steakhouse, right? The only thing to order here is the prime beef. Doesn't matter if they have pork or chicken on the menu. The right choice is beef." People nibbling on pork and chicken like they're poor should probably just leave at her absurd reasoning. Both Jessica and I were dumbfounded seeing our reactions. Julie continued to rant. "Only people like me who can afford to dine here twice a week should be using this place. After all, I work at Blue Bank. I'm an elite Blue Bank. A major bank is where I have an account, but something else caught my attention. I felt like I had seen Julie at Blue Bank before. Poor people like you have no right to taste the meat of the restaurant. Come on, just leave. As I watched Julie continue to rant, I finally remembered where I had seen her. Didn't you have a disagreement with me at a Blue Bank, Adam, recently? She seemed to recognize me as well and pointed, saying, "Ah, that annoying woman." The story dates back about a month ago. I stopped by Blue Bank to withdraw some money from the ATM. For some reason, the ATM, which should have been functional, wasn't working. The screen was pitch black, and it wasn't working. As I was wondering what the issue was, a bank employee with a name tag reading Julie approached. It was the same woman. "Hey, what did you do? Did you break the ATM?" Julie seemed to think I had broken the ATM and frowned at me. "No, I didn't break it. It wasn't working from the start. I think there might be some issue with it." I tried to explain, but Julie insisted that I had broken it. "Don't try to act like it wasn't your fault." Just then, the branch manager, Jim, arrived and asked what the problem was. When I explained the situation, Jim immediately apologized. "I'm sorry. That ATM is out of order. But it seems the notice sign fell off. It wasn't your fault, and we apologize for accusing you." Julie apologized. Urged by Jim, Julie apologized, but she clearly looked displeased. Although her attitude was upsetting, I decided it wasn't worth making a fuss and left. I had almost forgotten about the incident with Julie, but here she was again. I briefly told Jessica about the previous incident, and she whispered, "I see." It was clear that even if she didn't voice it, Jessica was taken aback by Julie's behavior. Seeing our reactions, Julie shouted, "Don't you dare look down on me, you poor people." By now, I could feel the stares of other customers. The staff was also looking over, unsure of how to intervene. "Please, keep your voice down. You're disturbing the other customers and the restaurant. Everyone's watching." I tried to warn her. Julie, realizing she was drawing attention, muttered, "Oh, I'm sorry," and started eating again. However, when the attention shifted away, she audaciously sat at our table. She whispered, "Just leave, you bottom-class poor family. The meat will taste bad. And until you leave, I'm gonna keep complaining in a low voice. I eat." I was getting frustrated. Julie was incredibly persistent. She seemed intent on bad-mouthing us until we left. "Mom, let's just leave. I've had enough to eat." Jessica seemed to be annoyed and quickly stood up. She probably wasn't full yet, but her desire to distance herself from Julie must have prevailed. Realizing that Julie was not the kind of person to have a conversation with, I decided to give up on eating at this restaurant. "I get it. We'll go somewhere else." Upon hearing that, Julie grinned at me. "Oh, finally got the hint? Gosh, poor people sure are slow to catch on. Why do we have to leave because of someone like her?" I wasn't gonna let this slide. I pulled out my phone, ready to retaliate. I'm about to call Jim, the branch manager, and cancel a deposit of $3 billion. If you apologize right now, I might reconsider. Heinous. Julie's face turned to shock for a moment, then she chuckled. "What's this about a $3 billion deposit? There's no way someone content with pork and chicken could have that kind of money. Perhaps T come up with a better lie." Julie clearly didn't believe me. Her lack of customer awareness was glaringly evident, and I sighed. "All right, I'll call the branch manager. I'll step outside the restaurant to do so, but don't say I didn't warn you." I took Jessica with me, settled the bill, and went outside. As I was about to make the call, Julie came out too. "This seems fun. I'll watch from here. You're probably not gonna call the branch manager, but some random guy, right? A setup. I can't wait to see who answers." Is annoyed by her taunting, I made the call. I dialed the number for Blue Bank and asked for Jim. Jim quickly came on the line, and when I explained the situation, he immediately apologized. "I'm so sorry. Julie has been incredibly rude. I'll make sure she doesn't bother you again." The Max Michelle. We'll consider disciplinary actions against her. Please reconsider canceling the deposit." No, I can't trust a bank with employees like that. Being treated as poor just for eating pork and chicken is just too much. Plus, she treated me as a suspect regarding an ATM incident without any proof. If you let Julie continue, I feel it could lead to a major financial issue in the future. I'd like to cancel before that happens. Jim was again heard apologizing, but then Julie snatched my phone and blurted out something unthinkable. "Who are you?" "Oh, claiming to be the branch manager. Are you this poor woman's husband?" She genuinely believed she wasn't speaking with Jim. Aptly for her, she was indeed speaking to the real branch manager. And Jim, after such disrespectful remarks, this wouldn't end well. From the other end, I heard Jim's angry voice shout, "Is that Julie speaking? I am Jim, the branch manager." Julie finally realized who she was talking to, her face going pale. "Are you really the branch manager? I thought she was calling some random guy." I'm so sorry." Julie kept apologizing over and over again. However, it was too late to apologize, no matter how she tried. From the phone, you could hear the loud voice of Jim, the branch manager, and Julie's face went pale as if she were ill. Jim's voice was hard to hear at times, but the words came in immediately. Yes. I'll pass the phone to Ms. Michelle now. I'm so sorry about that." She then handed me the smartphone, saying, "Here you go, it's your phone call," right, with a courteous gesture. "Thanks," I replied. I took the phone and spoke with Jim again. He wanted me to apologize properly, so we headed to Blue Bank. All the while, Julie looked distraught and couldn't focus. When we arrived, Jim greeted us. We were led to a meeting room, and Julie was told to apologize. Without resistance, Julie said, "I am deeply sorry." She then sat down on a nearby chair, holding her head in despair. Institution. I was enjoying some fancy steak, and I didn't expect this. I shouldn't have played hooky. Wait, you were playing hooky? Seeing my reaction, Julie looked taken aback. Well, not exactly playing hooky. I was just a bit tired. She tried hard to make an excuse, but it was too late, and with an awkward expression explained, "It's quite embarrassing, but Julie called in sick today due to a high fever. However, we found out from a call earlier that she was at a fancy steakhouse. In other words, she lied about being sick. Come to think of it, it was a weekday afternoon. The bank was open for regular business hours. To use sickness as excuse to eat fancy steak. After being rude to a client and skipping work, I really can't trust you anymore." Then apologized again, and Julie kept apologizing, saying, "I'm so sorry." However, she then added, "But come on, a deposit of $3 billion. You can't blame me for being skeptical." Jim immediately pointed out, "Didn't I inform you about Ms. Michelle a long time ago? And yet you didn't remember. This was your mistake, so stop complaining." "Yes, I'm very sorry." Julie's face showed regret as she apologized again. However, her demeanor didn't seem genuinely remorseful. It was evident she was merely apologizing because she was scolded. That half-hearted apology is enough. But a deposit of $300 million does seem unreal, doesn't it? Well, let me explain. Actually, my father had a passion for collecting paintings, but he passed away a few years ago. I kept his paintings as a keepsake for a while. Well, unfortunately, I couldn't appreciate their true value. I decided to sell them to someone who would cherish them more. And when I did, my account ballooned to $300 million. Is that even possible? Julie was more shocked than convinced. I was equally surprised when I sold the paintings, wondering how they could fetch such a high price. I understood how she felt. I didn't want to give my father's treasured paintings to just anyone, so I had them professionally appraised and sold them for their rightful value. As a result, I ended up with an unbelievable sum. I sold the last painting about 3 months ago. I wondered about keeping such a massive amount idle, but between part-time jobs and house chores, I just left it in the blue bank. I've decided to close the account. I think that my late father would advise against leaving so much money untouched. Upon hearing this, Jessica nodded. I agree with my mom. Having someone like Julie involved with such a significant amount of money does naturally raise concerns. Hearing this, Jim looked resigned. He understood. We'll go ahead and cancel that for you. That's the right. Julie will be dealt with strictly. Just when I thought everything was settled, Julie continued her pleas. Please wait a minute. What's gonna happen to me? Please don't punish me. You're not gonna fire me, are you? Stop causing a scene in front of the customer. Michelle, I'm terribly sorry. Please don't mind Julie's behavior. Before I knew it, Ben stepped in, but Julie suddenly gripped my arm tightly. Please, I beg you, convince the manager not to penalize me. If my pay gets cut or I get fired, I'll be in big trouble. Truth be told, I have debts. A bank worker with debts? And yet you're eating at fancy steakhouses. Maybe start with some budgeting. When I said this with a stern tone, Julie's face looked like she was about to cry. Don't be so cold. Once I started living luxuriously, I couldn't stop. Hey, why not share some of your $300 million with me? Just $100,000 would do. What an absurd request. Why should I give you any money? When I pushed back, Julie's face turned beet red and she snapped. Stingy rich folks, aren't you? Do you guys even work? Having $300 and still working? How much do you love money? Rich folks like you taking away jobs from others is simply low class. Our employers consider Jessica and I as formal employees. Please, you have no right to tell us to quit. I got my work ethic from my parents' upbringing. Because we were wealthy enough to collect high-end paintings, we were well off back home. However, my parents, fearing I would develop a skewed sense of money, always tried to maintain an ordinary lifestyle. My dad worked diligently, and my mom put her all into house chores and her part-time job. If my parents had been lazy just because they were rich, I might have never thought of working earnestly and might have ended up unemployed. Now, as an adult with a child, I've taken after my parents and I've raised Jessica with the same values. I took on part-time jobs because I wanted Jessica to see a hardworking woman as a role model. Perhaps that's why Jessica never became lazy and grew up to be a responsible adult in society. Also, working helps you learn common sense in society, and it adds structure to your life. That's why, even if we have money, we believe in working. I don't want unsensible folks like you meddling in our affairs. When I firmly spoke my piece, Julie was at a loss for words. Jim also said with a stern face, I get it, you're not remorseful. I'm gonna discuss firing you with the higher-ups, so brace yourself. Upon hearing this, Julie snapped back to reality. I'm so sorry. Miss Helvins to Michelle. I've been so stressed out lately and ended up complaining without thinking. I don't need a penny, just please forgive me. Obviously, after this series of events, I didn't feel like forgiving her. We don't need your insincere apologies. Face the consequences and suffer for it. I won't forgive you either. It's absurd that after saying such horrible things, you don't genuinely feel remorse. Following my lead, when Jessica spoke, it seemed Julie finally grasped that she wasn't getting any sympathy. She slumped dejectedly, muttering apologies over and over, but nobody comforted her. Fixed, later. I heard from Jim that Julie was fired. She was already known for being frequently late and was often rude to her juniors, so she had multiple issues with her work ethic. Just with this incident on top, she was swiftly fired. I heard that the moment Julie was informed of her termination, she collapsed on the spot. Reluctantly, an ambulance was called, and at the hospital, they discovered she had diabetes. Seems she didn't consider her age and indulged in meats and sweets daily, which has now put her in a critical condition. Which currently, I heard Julie is hospitalized, and the medical bills are piling up. Fixed, losing a job while in debt, and on top of that, having health issues. Her future's probably going to be pretty tough. The way things turned out for her feels like a harsher punishment than I expected, so my resentment towards her has faded. Jessica seemed to feel the same way, saying if she's suffering that much, let's let bygones be bygones. So on my end, I decided to manage the 3 billion yen I had in Blue Bank, which I guess would be something like $30 million here. After discussing it with my husband, who just returned from a long business trip, and Jessica, we decided to keep only what we'd need for the future and donate the rest. I didn't want any unnecessary attention, so I donated anonymously. This way, we didn't get any weird looks from the public. At the money we kept, we didn't leave it in Blue Bank, we put it in a different one. Our family tradition of going out for steak is still going strong. In fact, we all went out just yesterday. My husband was with us this time. We ordered not just beef but also pork and chicken. No one gave us any side glances, and we thoroughly enjoyed our meal. Both Jessica and my husband seemed pleased, and I personally had a blast enjoying the meat. I want to keep making these happy moments with my family. Of course, we're gonna keep an eye on our health too. Still single at your age. Pathetic for an old maid like you. I met my ex-husband at a fancy Chinese restaurant. Despite his persistent sarcastic remarks, we exchanged words, and then my sister, who eloped with someone else, appeared. When my ex-husband announced he'd be marrying her soon, I laughed at him mockingly. Oh, didn't I tell you? Feeling on top of the world, my ex-husband was caught off guard when I made a shocking confession. My name is Michelle Smith. I'm a 39-year-old housewife. I've been married to my husband, Mike, who works in the transportation business for about 2 years. We met at work where I was previously an office clerk. I took a liking to Mike's lively and cheerful demeanor and made the first move on him. I found his easygoing and manly charisma very appealing. It was love at first sight. Upon hearing my feelings, he reciprocated, and we got married in a short span of 6 months. I thought he was a kind and pleasant person while we were dating. However, after our marriage, he turned into someone else entirely. It became routine for him to shower me with abusive words, and there were times when his actions made me feel like I wasn't even treated as a human being. I never imagined married life would be so tough and painful. Every day became gloomy, and I gradually started to fear Mike. He is a truck driver, but his job is specifically as a light truck delivery driver. I wish he'd been a long-haul driver so he would have been away from home more often, giving me some breathing space. As a light truck driver, his job entails delivering many loads to various places in a single day. So he usually comes home in the evening. Early in our marriage, we had a tradition of going out for steak, and we all went out just yesterday. I had expressed my desire to work. I think I want to contribute to our finances. If both of us work, we can save more, and it'll be useful if we have kids. The moment I said that, Mike slammed his beer glass under the table and started berating me. "You saying my earnings aren't enough, huh?" I never intended to imply that, probably because he was drunk and overreacted. I found him terrifying. He seemed ready to hurl the glass at me at any moment, so I hurriedly tried to placate him. No, I just don't want to be a burden to you. That's all. You're probably looking down on me inside. Who do you think allows us to live this comfortably? Even if you work, you wouldn't earn much. Don't act all high and mighty. I realized after marrying him that Mike has extreme paranoia and wild mood swings. I never saw this side of him when we dated, so it was unexpected. Could I really spend the rest of my life with someone like this? The thought intensified my anxiety. But another incident fanned the flames of my worries. I'm truly happy Michelle married into our family. Mike rarely brought girlfriends home, so I was worried he'd never marry. This happened during a Thanksgiving gathering at my in-laws' house. They are genuinely kind people who dote on me a lot. When we got married, they were over the moon, as if they had gained a daughter. I got along well with my mother-in-law, and my father-in-law was also very kind to me. One of the few consolations in my suffocating married life was dining out with my in-laws. However, in front of them, Mike began making a mockery of me. That turning point was during a family reunion. Must be nice, huh? Having a beauty like Michelle? Look at my wife. See that flabby belly of hers? A male relative began making fun of his wife, drawing laughter from the crowd. Beside him, his wife playfully pinched his belly and chimed in, giving a sort of husband-wife comedy routine, lifting the mood. Then, my husband turned the tables and decided to poke fun at me. "What are you talking about, uncle? Michelle looks so childlike, hardly womanly. Your wife looks way more elegant and mature." I was left speechless by this unexpected comment and revelation. The male relative said, "Come on, cut it out." But everyone seemed to find it hilarious. The only ones who looked concerned were my in-laws. "Michelle, go to the kitchen. Help my wife with dinner preparations there." My father-in-law, seeing my distress, gave me these instructions as a way to escape the scene. Grateful, I rushed to the kitchen accompanied by my mother-in-law. Tears streamed down my face due to the overwhelming incident, but my mother-in-law comforted me as if she were my own mother. As for my father-in-law, he stepped in and chastised everyone, insisting they apologize to me. All did, except for my heavily intoxicated husband, who remained defiant. Wished a husband apologized to his wife. That's why Dad always gets ridiculed by Mom. Can you have some dignity? And for some reason, this led to a father-son argument. The gathering ended early that day, and from then on, the relationship between my husband and his father deteriorated. My visits to my husband's family home became infrequent. Life after that was a living nightmare. I lost my only source of joy and began to feel weak and lost day by day. Even daily chores felt monumental, and whenever my husband remembered that day, he'd shout at me, "You must have said something unnecessary to them." Thanks to you, I was humiliated in front of everyone. What was I to do about it? Fearing his temper, I became constantly on edge. Living on the 10th floor of an apartment building, I often thought if jumping would offer an escape from my misery. When we're mentally drained, making rational decisions becomes a challenge, and I felt exactly that way. It was then, during one of these despairing moments, my sister visited. "You haven't been in touch recently?" I got worried. "Michelle, you look awful." My elder sister, Etchern, who's 3 years older, worked nights. In her previous job, she was the most sought after, probably because she looked much younger than her age. It was rare for her to drop by unannounced. It turns out she was in the neighborhood checking on the renovations of her new club and decided to stop by. Something happened with your husband? My sister and I were the best of buddies growing up. When I got married, nobody was happier than my sister. Other end. She cried tears of joy and celebrated with me like no other. I just want to disappear. Pooey, what happened? Seeing the distraught look on Catherine's face, tears welled up in my eyes as I conveyed the painful situation I was in. Every day, it felt like I was being emotionally abused by my husband. It felt like living in a prison, a life full of pain and despair. There were moments I thought of ending it all, overwhelmed by it all. Catherine, after hearing all of this, showed visible anger, saying she's gonna go yell at my husband right then and there. But just imagining what could happen to me if she did made me even more scared. Tears streaming down my face. I pleaded with her not to confront him, seeing my reaction. Catherine regained her composure and started brainstorming what could be done. It could be done. After a silence between us, something seemed to click in Catherine's mind. Just with a bright expression, she whispered a plan into my ear. Hearing her plan, I exclaimed in surprise and asked if she was out of her mind. You think that'll actually work? Who do you think I am? Catherine said, confidence oozing from her every pore. I trust Catherine to pull it off, but the risks if her plan was discovered made me anxious. Don't you want to get out of this and be free? Seeing me unable to make a decision, Catherine turned serious and told me it was ultimately up to my courage. Hearing that, I made up my mind and agreed to her plan. From that day on, Catherine came over nearly every day. People who are emotionally abusive tend to act all high and mighty in public. If I'm around, he won't be able to pull anything on you. Michelle, right? Saying this, she visited me frequently over the next few months until her new shop was ready. At first, my husband seemed unsure of Catherine's frequent visits, but he seemed to enjoy the drinks they shared every evening, gradually warming up to her. Catherine made sure Mike drank enough to get really drunk and stayed with him until he fell asleep. You're always joining me for drinks, so feel free to stay the night anytime. Mike, now quite fond of Catherine, began to show her affection he never showed me, even trying to stop her from leaving. But Catherine always declined his offer with a polite smile, assuring him she'd be back the next day. For Mike, time spent with Catherine seemed like a dream. He was so enchanted by her that he seemed to have forgotten all about me. But then, when Catherine's shop was about to have its grand reopening, an incident occurred. I'm divorcing you. Out of the blue, Mike declared he wanted a divorce. Naturally, I was shocked by his words and demanded an explanation. Wait, all of a sudden, I found someone I care about more than you. I want to be happy with her. I want you to leave. I flat out refused to accept his selfish reasoning. However, Mike seemed to have expected this and coldly mentioned hiring a lawyer. A meeting with a lawyer present took place a few days later. Flirtery even there. Mike hurled unbelievable accusations at me. You just want money, right? Do you want the property? I'll give whatever you ask, so let's end this. It's in front of anyone. Mike made it clear he no longer had feelings for me. He seemed to want to end our marriage so badly that he didn't mind paying a hefty sum to make it happen. The lawyer, probably feeling uncomfortable, showed me the average amounts for such cases. You really don't have much affection for me, do you? I could tell where your heart was. But easily figuring out who you're thinking of and who you wish to spend your life with. I lowered my head, realizing resisting was futile, and accepted the divorce terms. Fine. But I demand the division of the property. He probably thinks he can just earn it back. Mike, oblivious and elated at the thought of a smooth divorce. Yet, watching him, I let out a mysterious smirk. And without him catching on, the divorce proceedings went underway. However, while I may have accepted, it was Mike's parents who firmly opposed it. Later, when we went to inform his parents, they shouted at Mike and spoke in my defense. What on earth are you thinking? Exactly. Michelle has been so dedicated to this family, and you talk about divorce. And having someone else. You can't be serious. His mother, teary-eyed, tried to convince Mike while his father, with a flushed face, was visibly angered and scolded him. But their words seemed to be just noise to him. Annoyed, he dismissively responded, It doesn't matter if you accept it or not. She's already agreed to it. It's because you pushed her into a corner with lawyers. They must have really not wanted us to divorce. They've always cherished me like their own child, and the thought of separation was painful to them. I could feel their desperate pleas, and I felt guilty for betraying them. I love them too. I would love to live as their daughter. If only things didn't turn out this way with Mike. Regret was the only thing that filled my heart, and I couldn't hold back the tears. People like you are so damn annoying. I'm done with her. I'm gonna marry someone I truly care for and be happy. Stop nagging me. Mike, now completely enraged by his parents' words, started shouting back in defiance. Naturally, they couldn't accept his decision, and Mike was disowned right there and then. And so, Mike left his parents' home, apparently eloping with his love interest, and our divorce was finalized. Half a year passed. I was dining at an upscale Chinese restaurant, invited by someone and enjoying a meal with my parents. Isn't that Michelle? The one who called out to me was none other than Mike. I'd gone outside to make a call and bumped into him in the hallway. Long time no see. Didn't think you were still around. His condescending tone hadn't changed. My face must have shown my disgust. What's with that face? If you got something to say, spit it out. He wasn't shouting because we were in public, but he still looked down at me with cold eyes. I held back my anger and turned my face away. Acting all high and mighty when you can't even stand up for yourself. Did you manage to scabben? Did you manage to find a boyfriend after our split? Mocking my demeanor, Mike sneered at me. I knew the side of him only after our marriage, and I regret not realizing it sooner. It doesn't concern you anymore, without even confirming if I was in a relationship. Mike, with his usual sly grin, kept on taunting me. Really? Still single? Pretty pathetic for an old hag. Mike peered into my face with an expression that screamed he felt he'd won at life, even more so than before our split. I was about to give him a piece of my mind when, Michelle, Mike, didn't expect to see you two here. My sister Catherine walked into the store, calling out to both of us. Uttering, perfect timing. I was just about to share some news with Michelle here. The smug look on Mike's face was almost disgusting as he snaked an arm around Catherine, drawing her close. I just stood there, not letting his actions fluster me, my gaze icy cold as I watched the scene unfold. I thought I'd tell her first that we're gonna get married. He bragged, pulling Catherine even closer. I had always suspected that his feelings for Catherine were the real reason he wanted a divorce. But looking at them now with emotionless eyes, Mike, still not realizing the gravity of the situation, shot me a smug grin. Sorry, I guess. I mean, I'm gonna be living the dream with her. But hey, you're not too bad looking. Maybe with a bit of effort? I'm sorry. Mike, I can't marry you, gently shaking off his arm. Catherine dropped the bombshell with a smile. His face was a picture of shock, unable to comprehend her statement. The truth is, I never had any feelings for you. Wait, what? What are you saying? Didn't she tell you? I couldn't resist, my voice dripping with mock confusion as I savored every moment of his confusion. What do you mean didn't tell me? The whole thing, Mike, was a plot, Catherine, and I hatched to make sure we divorced. And as I walked over to join my sister, we exchanged amused smiles. Even witnessing this, Mick couldn't fathom what was going on. His words came out jumbled. Was this all just a play? Thanks to Catherine here. I got quite the alimony from you. I'm really grateful for that. Sure, rejecting his initial proposal for divorce was all part of a plan to get as much property as possible from him. It was all Catherine's idea. I was eager to divorce but didn't want to raise suspicion. That's why I played along. No way. Catherine would never say that. We're not, Mike, struggling to come to terms with the truth. Mike babbled on, refusing to believe my words. I tilted my head in confusion and asked, "Why'd you say that? Why would Catherine say something like that? She said she's going to marry me? Well, if you took my sales pitch so seriously, I was just doing my job, entertaining a client." Catherine responded to Mike's comment, her brows furrowed in feigned concern. She touched her cheek with an exaggeratedly innocent gesture, sighing softly as she spoke. "I only entertained you as a client. I'm sorry if I gave you the wrong impression. So you've been fooling me this whole time. For the past 6 months, you were such a valuable customer. Mike, always trying to one-up everyone. It was kind of cute, actually." Mockingly, my sister spoke with a derisive laugh. The ex-husband, completely fooled by her theatrical performance, displayed his anger and raised his voice despite being inside a shop. All those words about wanting to be with me, asking me to divorce Michelle, were all lies. Who in their right mind would want to be with someone like you, an emotionally abusive husband? What did you just say? The sharp words of my sister infuriated my ex-husband, who began breathing heavily in agitation. While cautiously watching out for any signs, the ex-husband might become physically aggressive. I observed their exchange and discreetly reached for my phone. It was hard keeping up the charade for half a year, but thankfully you're simple-minded. It wasn't like I could just stay married to you. In truth, my sister was already married when I was with my ex-husband. She has a husband who works as a bodyguard. To ensnare my ex-husband, my sister persuaded him by saying she was also going to get a divorce. First, from the perspective of my ex, who had never been popular in his life, the fact that someone was chasing after him so much was a delightful feeling. At the same time, he reveled in the superiority of being able to take someone away from another. Essentially, he fell right into my sister's trap. So about you taking time to get that divorce? That was obviously a lie. As you can see, my marriage is perfectly fine. At that moment, a man emerged from behind, walking towards us with a smile. Pleasure to meet you. Seems like my wife has been causing you some trouble. You can't be serious. This is my husband. I invited him today to introduce him to you. My sister, with her radiant smile, made a point to show off by linking arms with my brother-in-law, exuding happiness. My ex-husband looked dumbfounded, his face a mix of anger and sadness. It's a shame, isn't it? Wasting half a year only to end up being thrown out of your own home. He tried to lash out at me, reaching to grab my collar, but my brother-in-law swiftly intervened, handling him like he was a mere child. What do you know about what I've gone through this past year, chasing after her? Do you understand? I don't, and I don't want to. You play with people's lives, and then act all high and mighty. Do you understand how much pain you've caused me? Facing my ex-husband's aggressive stance, my voice broke with anger and tears as I finally let out all the frustrations I'd bottled up. The way you ridiculed me in front of our family. Your attitude towards your in-laws. All your actions during our marriage. I will never forgive you. You're going to get a taste of hell. I then turned around and called out, "Please, come out." Emerging from the room behind me were not just my ex-husband's parents, but also my own parents and even my husband's relatives. Now everyone can see your true colors and just how pathetic you truly are. Ignoring my ex's questioning gaze, I played a voice recording I had received from my sister. It had him speaking to her in a disgustingly sweet manner. "Are you really going to break up with Michelle? Of course. I don't need someone useless who can only do house chores. I prefer someone mature and attractive like you. Thanks, Catherine." His sleazy voice was so palpable that it made my skin crawl. Even though it was nauseating to hear, I did not stop the playback. In front of the entire family, my ex-husband was being made an example of. "Do you love Michelle? Of course not. She's nothing more than a maid to me. I only married her because she would be a notch in my belt. No emotional connection there." Everyone was visibly repulsed by his comments. He started to create a scene, demanding the recording be turned off, but my burly brother-in-law wasn't having it. He restrained him effortlessly, ensuring he couldn't interfere. "She's so obedient. Just a little threat, and she'll do anything. She's more like a servant, someone I can throw away anytime. I have no attachments to her." Having heard the evidence of the emotional abuse he directed at me, his in-laws were furious. Everyone present unanimously criticized him. "You're a disgrace to this family. How could you say such things about your dear wife? You're pathetic, even for a man. I'm embarrassed to even call you family." As everyone looked at him with contempt, I spoke coldly. "Nobody's on your side anymore. Stay away from her family. I never want to see your face again." Having masterfully executed this public reprimand, I stopped the voice recorder and asked my brother-in-law to throw him out. My ex tried to retaliate, but to no avail. He was forcibly ejected from the premises. After that, the store was locked up, but my husband made a scene out front demanding it be opened. Eventually, he was reported and taken to the police station. My sister and I, having exposed my husband's wrongdoings, gave each other a high five and shared our joy of having achieved our revenge. It felt like a celebration as we ordered food at the restaurant, and everyone showed sympathy for the hardships I had endured. Reserving the whole place was the right call. Everyone could relax and enjoy without feeling restrained, said my sister, Akin, who had arranged it. I expressed my gratitude to Catherine, who had helped me through everything, and I savored a meal with her for the first time in a while. And so, I got my revenge on my ex-husband. After that, it seemed like he was almost stalking Catherine, got reported to the police again, and apparently my brother-in-law, Mike, gave him a taste of his own medicine. After that, Mike was too scared to show his face around my brother-in-law. 13 years have passed since, and now I'm handling the accounting at Catherine's store. I'm still in touch with my ex-in-laws and occasionally dine with them. I'm deeply grateful to Catherine for helping me out of my shell. I'll repay this favor someday. With that thought, today, I'm gonna work hard alongside Catherine. I live with my son, so you need to leave. Suddenly, my mother-in-law I'm living with threw those cold words at me. I thought I'd have always been good to my mother-in-law. I've always tried to make sure she didn't have any inconveniences, but it seems my mother-in-law never noticed. There have been times when my mother-in-law treated me poorly, and I have grown resentful of her. Finally, I was like, I'll gladly leave. I haven't intended to say that, but I thought that was probably how I truly felt. My husband is away on a business trip. The only one who'd be in trouble if I left would be my mother-in-law. The luxurious life she's been enjoying in the city is because of me. Had my mother-in-law forgotten that? With these thoughts, I've decided to leave the house. My name is Catherine. I'll be turning 38 this year. My husband and I have been married for 10 years, and we both work. We once considered having children, but the doctor told me it would be difficult for me to conceive. I was told natural conception was nearly impossible, and we considered fertility treatments. However, after many discussions, my husband and I decided not to have children and to enjoy our lives together. Then my father-in-law got sick and passed away. My mother-in-law had bad knees, and living alone in the family home was tough. We thought about hiring a caregiver, but for safety reasons, it seemed best if she lived with us. We were planning to build a house at that time, so we designed it with a room for my mother-in-law in mind. For her convenience, given my mother-in-law's bad knees, we installed a small bathroom, kitchen, and toilet on the first floor. On the second floor, we have our own bathroom and kitchen, thinking my mother-in-law would be comfortable. Though it went over our budget, we felt it was the best decision considering my mother-in-law's comfort. It showed our consideration and kindness. But it seemed my mother-in-law didn't see it that way. I could tell from my mother-in-law's behavior since she started living with us. I never had a bad impression of her before, but recently she's become more aggressive toward me. Moreover, my mother-in-law always becomes more aggressive when my husband's not at home. My husband is in sales, and recently he's been traveling abroad more often. While he used to have day trips frequently, it's different with overseas trips. He often stays away for about a week per trip. That very day, my husband mentioned he'd be on an international business trip for about a week. After sending my husband off early in the morning, I began getting ready for work. Suddenly, I heard my mother-in-law's loud voice from downstairs. "Pin, come down here right now." Wondering what the fuss was about, I quickly headed to the first floor, but everything looked normal. My mother-in-law was just sitting in the living room, watching TV. I'd assumed there was some sort of emergency. Then she was like, "Why are you just standing there? Hurry up and make my breakfast." I had never prepared breakfast for my mother-in-law before, as my husband and I both have full-time jobs, and she always made her own. I wondered what had changed. Maybe she wasn't feeling well? I suggested she might need to see a doctor, but she was like, "I'm perfectly fine. Can't you see? Shouldn't my son's wife take care of me?" I've heard other households serve a 3-course breakfast every morning. Turns out, the family she was referring to lives together just like us, but the wife is a homemaker. So she prepares meals 3 times a day. I tried to explain that my husband and I both work, so it's impossible for me to cook in the mornings or midday. But my mother-in-law just turned the TV volume up in frustration. I figured she didn't want to hear what I had to say, so I decided not to say anything more. That day, after finishing work and returning home, I found my mother-in-law waiting for dinner. I made lasagna that my mother-in-law loves, but she was like, "What's this? It's way too salty," and threw all the food I prepared into the trash. After that incident, my mother-in-law became very domineering, constantly picking on me and nitpicking everything I did. But when things got unbearable, I confided in a friend who suggested it might be bullying by my mother-in-law. Today, upon researching online, I found numerous similar stories from other daughters-in-law. As my mother-in-law's behavior continued to worsen, I decided to have a heart-to-heart conversation with her. I took a day off from work and approached her during the day. I said, "Hey, why have you suddenly started acting so hostile? We've always lived in harmony. If I've done something wrong, let me know. But if you don't talk to me, I won't know how to make things right." However, she didn't seem interested in listening. When I patiently faced my mother-in-law, she eventually started to speak. Apparently, she had become envious after hearing about a family she'd talked about some time ago. In that family, there are 2 kids, a daughter and a son, and the couple lives with the husband's parents. Their home is more spacious than ours, and she's envious because they have coffee with many guests. She mentioned that she wished to spend her retirement in such a manner. Our home isn't necessarily small. In our neighborhood, it's actually considered quite large. We have a backyard big enough for barbecue parties, and I told her we could host home parties without any issues. But she felt inferior and believed she couldn't compete, hence not inviting anyone over. Our conversation didn't conclude with any resolution. However, a few days later, an incident occurred. As I was leaving for work, a lady from across the street was staring at me. But even moreover, I noticed people whispering and glancing my way elsewhere, wondering if there was something odd about my attire or makeup. I checked but found nothing amiss. I discovered the reason for the whispers that evening. Was on my way home from work. One of the neighbors approached me and said, "Hey, I've heard some rumors. You know violence ain't right." Violence? I was taken aback. Digging deeper, the rumor was that I had become violent with my mother-in-law. It was said that the confrontation took place on the day we had that discussion, and that I even told her to leave if she continued with her lavish lifestyle. I have no memory of doing such a thing, and had no intentions of ever doing so. After explaining, the lady thought for a moment and was like, "If that's true, it's really not good." The whole neighborhood's buzzing with this story. And for a while, I was labeled in the neighborhood as the violent wife. I managed to bear it until about 5 days after my husband left on a business trip, finally reaching my breaking point. I felt I needed to talk to my husband first, but I couldn't muster the courage to bother him with this during his busy trip. So, I decided to first communicate my feelings. I took to my mother-in-law. "I've noticed that you seem to have taken a disliking to me this past week. You're my husband's mother, and I wanted us to live comfortably together. No matter how hard I try, it seems I can't change how you feel. Perhaps it would be best if we consider living separately." My mother-in-law looked taken aback by my suggestion for a moment, but then she said, "I agree. I never really liked you from the start. Living in this fancy house on my son's dime, acting as if you've done it all. A woman who doesn't even have kids and only works has little value in my eyes," and scoffed. At that point, I wondered my mother-in-law was misunderstanding. Because you see, I bought this house. From the down payment of the mortgage, everything's been on me. I had explained it when we built the house, but I wonder if my mother-in-law has forgotten. However, I'm the one covering the living expenses. My mother-in-law gets an allowance from my husband and spends it carelessly, but that's also coming out of my salary. Even though my husband is working hard, he's not making as much as expected, and his income is lower compared to mine. So the agreement was that we'd cover our living expenses from my income and save whatever my husband made since we don't have kids and for our future. Before we moved in together, my husband had explained this to her, and he had warned her not to be wasteful. Ever since my husband left on his business trip, my mother-in-law has been watching TV infomercial every day and making phone calls. She probably ordered something. As I was thinking about all this, she started saying things like, "I'm gonna live here with my son. You should leave. I'll discuss the rest with my son. If my son wants, you might even consider a divorce." So be prepared for that. At this point, I realized it's useless to argue. I gave up. I said, "I'll gladly leave," quickly packed my largest suitcase, and decided to leave the house with all I could carry. Before leaving, I glanced at my mother-in-law and she was smirking at me. She laughed aloud and said, "Oh, leaving so soon? That's not too bad of you, but maybe you could be a bit more charming." Honestly, I don't remember doing anything to upset my mother-in-law this much. Whenever my mother-in-law asked for a ride, I would provide one. I tried my best to spend time with her, so she wouldn't feel lonely. We haven't given her the joy of grandkids and I work. However, that's the life choice we made as a couple, and my mother-in-law has no right to dictate that. As anger surged within me, I thought my mother-in-law'd be the one regretting this in the end. At that thought, I left the house with my heavy luggage. But when told to leave, I wondered where I'd go. My childhood home is a plane ride away, and I couldn't abandon my job. Also, I didn't want to worry my parents. The first place that came to mind was my office. I run my own business, a small cafe. I employ 2 students as part-time, but primarily I manage it on my own. The cafe is in a 1-story house, with the extra space used as an office and storage. Though it's a small house, there's enough space for someone to live. I usually drove from home to the office, but living at the office would cut down the commute. Now, I won't need to cook for my mother-in-law anymore, which means more time for work. As someone passionate about my job, I got excited thinking about the extra working hours while setting up a living space in the office. I cleared out the piles of cardboard boxes and decided to sleep on the blanket I had laid out for napping. I also arranged a table and chairs to make work easier. By evening, 2 student part-timers came in for their shifts. They were surprised to see the office looking different, but once I explained the situation, they readily understood. They were even like, "Let us know if you need anything. We'll help out wherever we can." At that moment, I felt grateful for hiring them. They're such kind-hearted individuals, and they've received excellent feedback from our customers. I've been checking the reviews for our cafe daily, and besides the ambiance and the quality of food, many patrons praised the service provided by the part-timers. I had been thinking about raising their pay when I received a call from my husband, who was supposed to be on a business trip. I could only check the message around 9 p.m. My husband mentioned he got home earlier than expected. However, upon arriving, he noticed a lot of my belongings were missing. He confronted my mother-in-law, but my mother-in-law wouldn't spill the beans about my whereabouts. After pressing her for about an hour, she finally explained. My husband then realized I had left due to issues with my mother-in-law and quickly tried to contact me. There were several missed calls, but considering my husband didn't show up at my workplace, I appreciated his understanding of my situation. Feeling guilty about making him worry, I called him back. Without delay, my husband answered, asking what had happened. I was hesitant about whether to be honest about everything, but my husband's persistence made me spill the truth. I briefly explained what my mother-in-law had done to me, and I could tell from my husband's voice that he was furious. He wanted to talk as soon as I finished work. After locking up the cafe and office, I headed home. I'd never seen my husband this mad before. Thus, the thought of meeting my husband in this state was intimidating. I reached home around 10 p.m. and noticed that only the lights on the first floor were on. My husband and my mother-in-law must be in the living room. When I tried to unlock the door, my key wouldn't fit. I knocked at the door, and my husband came out to unlock the door. As I entered the living room, there sat my mother-in-law with a sulky expression. Apparently, after I left, she had changed the locks without telling anyone. My husband hadn't noticed earlier since the door was unlocked when he got back from his trip. My husband immediately wanted to hear the whole story from me, so I told him about the incidents over the past week. I explained how my mother-in-law suddenly became overbearing, wouldn't listen during our talks, and went as far as spreading lies about me to the neighbors. Every time I pointed this out, she would accuse me of lying. However, when my husband insisted on hearing everything, she just went silent. After I finished speaking, it was my mother-in-law's turn. My mother-in-law claimed I was violent towards her and wouldn't stop, even when she asked me to. She mentioned she had talked with neighbors, but the harassment from me only seemed to increase. She even began to say that if the neighbors were asked, they would know all about my doings. I wondered what made my mother-in-law so confident to make such outrageous claims. The conversation seemed to be going in circles, and there was no clear conclusion. So, I decided to show something to my husband. I've been collecting video and audio footage. With just a few taps on my smartphone, I could record instantly, and over the past week, I had recorded every time my mother-in-law made snide remarks. Whenever I had the chance, I would prop up my phone to capture my mother-in-law harassing me on video. The footage showed my mother-in-law yelling at me to make dinner and even calling me defective for not having children. Seeing this, my husband was furious, his face turning bright red. As on the contrary, my mother-in-law looked pale as if she had seen a ghost. In a desperate attempt to save face, she was like, "This isn't right, answering. It's just a misunderstanding. It seems like I'm the bad one, but that's because you cut out the parts where you were being mean. In reality, you've done much worse to me." But my husband, who had experience with video editing, wasn't convinced. If the video had been edited unnaturally, he would have noticed right away. It seemed like my husband completely trusted me. Just as I hoped, he began considering living separately from my mother-in-law. Despite my mother-in-law's vehement objections, my husband seemed firm in his decision. For the time being, I decided to stay at an office. During this period, we discussed whether to live separately and how to go about it if we decided to. Eventually, a conclusion was reached. We were to send my mother-in-law to a nursing home. But to a nursing home, we'd been against this idea before we moved in together. It seemed like a secure environment where she'd be looked after 24/7. However, my mother-in-law had always said she didn't want to go into a facility. I thought that if she did, it would be incredibly stressful for her. But my husband revealed he had been considering this option for a while. that with my mother-in-law's bad knee and both of us working, we just couldn't give her the attention she needed. He believed that the only way to ensure her safety was for her to be in a facility. However, my mother-in-law really pleaded not to be put in a facility, but my husband didn't budge. My husband isn't someone who shows it much, but he really adores me. I started dating him due to his relentless pursuit, and from the time we began our relationship to our marriage, things moved incredibly fast. After getting married, my husband was always helpful around the house, and always seemed to put me first. So, I kind of saw it coming when he took my side over my mother-in-law's. My mother-in-law apparently hadn't noticed, and assumed my husband would be on her side. But when she was told my mother-in-law'd be placed in a facility, she quickly apologized to me. However, my husband was still upset and didn't listen to anything my mother-in-law said. During all this, I was focusing on running my cafe, initially open from lunchtime. I began opening it for breakfast and started serving alcohol in the evenings. And just to my surprise, the number of customers nearly doubled. I was so shocked by the huge response that I inadvertently shared the news with my mother-in-law. I was like, thanks to you kicking me out, the cafe is doing better than ever. Thanks for giving me this opportunity, but it seemed to come off as sarcasm to my mother-in-law. I'll never forget the look on my mother-in-law's face when I told her about the cafe's success. Her lips were tight and her eyes weren't smiling. In the end, we had my mother-in-law stay at the closest senior facility. Although the cost was higher compared to other places, it was known for its excellent services. Despite the past tensions, I never wished any ill on my mother-in-law. I'm actually thankful for her raising my husband to be the man he is. So when it came to choosing a facility for her, I wanted to find the best possible place. Being somewhat forced into the facility, I heard my mother-in-law was causing a lot of trouble there. Whenever he visited, I was told she had issues with other residents. The reasons for these disputes were minor things, like making eye contact or speaking too loudly. She often clashed with other residents, but fortunately, it never reached a point where they'd kick her out. They ended up isolating her from the others. The staff kept me updated about my mother-in-law's situation. Initially, my mother-in-law was quite spirited, but about 6 months into her stay, I was told she seemed to lose her energy. She probably felt lonely without talking to others. Recently, with the help of the staff, I received a report that she's now able to converse well with other residents. However, it seems my mother-in-law's nature hasn't changed, and due to her bad attitude, she was evicted from the facility. Although she moved to another facility, she ended up isolated and her loneliness seemed to intensify, possibly leading to dementia. It's a bit sad that she had to be separated from her son, my husband. Still, if it ensures everyone's peace, it might be for the best. Now, I live in Europe with my husband. It's my husband, who had been traveling abroad more frequently for work, recently said he wouldn't be able to return home for about a month. Then, he suggested he'd like to take me abroad with him. I run a cafe and thought I couldn't possibly leave, but luckily 2 of my student workers were graduating, so I decided to close the cafe and follow my husband. I dreamed of running a restaurant abroad and set off for Europe. At first, the language barrier was tough, and I mostly stayed home. But after making friends in the neighborhood, my perspective changed. A friend got me a job at the local grocery store, and gradually, I was able to communicate better. Eventually, I decided to open a small cafe in the corner of a town. We had a house back in Oregon, which was still being mortgaged. We contemplated whether to sell it or not, but due to some false rumors in the neighborhood, we sold it to fund the new cafe. Thanks to the many acquaintances I'd made, a lot of people visited on the opening day. It was also promoted on social media as a homey cafe run by an American, and some customers even came all the way from the US. The reason I started the cafe was that I managed to get permanent residency in Europe. The reason my husband was traveling more was that he was getting more work opportunities abroad than in the US. My husband's company proposed relocating him to their branch in Europe, so we just ended up settling there. He eventually quit that job, but in his new job, he seems to be really shining and is now earning about the same as I am. When we were like we've settled down here in Europe, and with both of us, it's hard to figure out where to use our money. To our surprise, we found out we were expecting. We were told natural conception would be difficult, but it feels like a gift from above. Raising a child will be challenging, but I believe my husband and I will manage. We can't wait to meet our baby, even though the due date is a way off. The town I live in is filled with friendly folks, and when I shared the news of my pregnancy, everyone was genuinely thrilled for me. I believe that in this environment, our child will surely have a happy life. It wasn't a major accident, was it? I'm going on a trip now, so take care of things there. When I heard my dad was hospitalized, I was taken aback. I hoped my mother-in-law would come with me, but she left our trip anyway. A week passed, and my mind was filled with these events, leaving my husband and me bewildered. Then, with no knowledge of what transpired, my mother-in-law came back with great energy. To her I said, "Your husband's funeral is over." She clutched her head, lost and confused by my words. "My name is Catherine Turn. I'm turning 30 this year. I live with my husband Bob and my dad. I lost my mom at a young age, so my dad raised me, his only daughter, when getting married. I didn't want to leave my father alone. Bob happily agreed to this sentiment. Thanks to that, he came to live at my family home as a son-in-law. This year marks our 5th wedding anniversary. Hey Bob, let's go out for drinks this weekend. Found a great place. Is that so? Well, just don't drink too much, okay? If you get too drunk, it'll be hard for you to get home. Watching them talk and laugh together, there are moments they seem just like a real father and son. While Bob is a bit introverted, he's kind and friendly to everyone. My dad seems to appreciate that, which makes me happy. However, not everyone is happy about their bond. Victor, my mother-in-law, very Metzing. She seemed displeased that her precious son was living at his wife's family home. I can understand her feelings to some extent, but it was Bob's decision. Honestly, I wish she'd accept it. They lived from the start of our marriage. Whenever she visited, she never missed a chance to throw shade my way. Bob is married into your family, but he's still my son in every way that matters. No matter how many years pass, this line is always her opener. Then she continues with, and remember, Etron, you're not a guest when you're at your husband's family home. About with the chores. Saying this, she'd have me do everything from cleaning to cooking. But honestly, I never felt like I was just a visitor there. I carried out my duties without complaints, which probably annoyed her since she ran out of things to criticize. However, when it came to cooking, I'd always check in on how she preferred things. "Mary, how's the seasoning for the stew?" Without a word, she'd start adjusting it. Yet, she'd never missed an opportunity to critique. "This is nothing like our family's recipe. How could you make me taste this?" "Start over," she'd say, clearly displeased, and would then try to discard what I made. I always got angry at this behavior, but I could never speak up. I was afraid that if I did, I wouldn't know what she'd say next. Yet, in moments like these, my father-in-law would intervene. "Catherine put a lot of effort into that. How would you feel if someone tossed out your hard work?" "Well, it's not seasoned right, and it's too salty. Not good for her health." No matter how much she defended me, she wouldn't listen. I never intended to make the food overly salty. In fact, I often aimed for a lighter taste, adding more seasoning little by little. But she'd always find something to complain about. Bob sometimes stood up for me, but this only aggravated Mary Maury. "You don't need to say that much, Ashma. You're going overboard. Mind your own business." Bob always got silenced like that by his mother. Yet later, he'd apologize saying, "Sorry for not speaking up." I'd always smile and reply to Bob, "It's alright." I always felt that she was just bitter, thinking I stole her son away. So I believed she was just making life hard for me out of spite. Once I started thinking that way, I decided not to let her words get to me. And the fact that Bob and my father-in-law would stand up for me became my encouragement. But even though I tried not to let it affect me, if I kept hearing the same things every time I went to their house, it would still break my spirit. 5 years passed in the blink of an eye. Even now, whenever I visit their house, she never fails to make snide comments at me. I've become good at brushing off most of what she says, so now her only remarks are about my cooking. She'd hint with a smile, suggesting she's about to start with her sarcasm. "How do you even manage to season the food this way? Odd, isn't it? I cook just how you told me to." I'd retort, matching her tit for tat. After 5 years, I'm not the pushover I used to be. It's at the start of our marriage, I was more reserved, and there were many things I wanted to say but didn't. But now, given my nature, I've been speaking up more. Not that it would make her back down, and her remarks towards me didn't cease. In fact, they became even worse. One day, she surprisingly praised my cooking. "Oh, it turned out quite decent today." But there's still room for improvement. I was puzzled by her comment, yet took it as rare praise. That's when Bob intervened. "Actually, it's always good." Seeing her reaction to his words, she was visibly upset. And then, as always, the snarky comments began. Don't get ahead of yourself. Just because I complimented you, I haven't changed anything. I made it how you said. I'm actually grateful for your advice. She gave a grimace and then spoke. Oh, scary. Young wives these days talk back a lot. And with that, she left the room. It's talking like I've not only been talking back, but also not feeling as affected by her words. But there was one topic that always got to me. The fact that we didn't have kids even after 5 years of marriage. Whenever she ran out of comebacks, she'd always bring that up. I've been wanting to see my grandchild, but it seems that's still far off. When will be? I'd be at a loss for words against such comments. Indeed, not having children after 5 years does bring concerns. But I believe the more you rush things, the harder they get. So even though I try not to let it affect me, it still hurts when she brings it up. It was becoming a real source of stress for me. Then one day, she called me out of the blue. Mary, what's the urgency? I was puzzled by the sudden call. Then, the mother-in-law responded with a gleeful look on her face. Oh, didn't I tell you? I'm going on a trip with my friends. I've been planning this for a while. I'll be back in about a week. Please take care of the house. I was shocked as I hadn't heard anything about a trip. But then I realized something and asked. It looks like you've packed only for yourself. Isn't your husband going? He's staying home. I'm going with my friends. Why would I bring him? So please take care of him. That's unexpected. Just as I was about to retort, my phone rang. However, I didn't recognize the number, so I initially ignored it, but the calls kept coming. Suspicious. I decided to answer, and to my surprise, it was a police officer. Is this Mrs. Catherine Turn's phone? Yes, it is. Wondering why the police were calling. I answered the question. Then I was told a shocking truth. Apparently, my father had been in a serious car accident and was taken to the hospital in an ambulance. I was even told he was unconscious. No way, my dad. Overwhelmed by shock, I crouched down right where I was. Before I knew it, tears were streaming down my face. Seeing me like that, my mother-in-law spoke up. What happened all of a sudden? My dad's been in a car accident and was taken by ambulance. As I responded through my tears, she unexpectedly said, Oh, that's all. They said he's unconscious. Can't you come with me? I feel so alone right now. I begged desperately, but she frowned and replied, I can't do that. It's probably not a big deal anyway. Besides, I gotta go on a trip now. You handle your stuff on your own. Take care of everything, okay? I can't believe. I tried to plead again, but she grabbed her bags and left the house. I thought, what if something happens to my dad? What should I do now? Then my father-in-law gently put his hand on my shoulder and quietly said, Let's go to the hospital first. I'll be there with you. Seeing the kind smile on his face, I felt relieved. So together with him, I headed to the hospital. Look, once we arrived and were guided to my father's room, tears once again welled up in my eyes. After a while, Bob also rushed to the hospital. But instead of the distraught me, my father-in-law explained the situation, even mentioning my mother-in-law's trip. Catherine, don't worry about anything now. Stay by your dad's side. I can manage things at home by myself. Don't stress out. Thank you so much. I managed to say, overwhelmed with gratitude. And so, I kept a sleepless vigil by my unresponsive father's side. A week went by, and after dinner, Bob and I quietly drank some tea. Our minds were full, trying to process the events of the past few days. Then, unaware of our state, my mother-in-law came home cheerfully. I'm back. Sorry for being so late. I planned to be home earlier, but there was a lot of traffic. She spoke gleefully, but Bob and I remained silent, looking down. Still, she continued, The spa trip was so fun. Oh, and I got souvenirs for both of you. My cheerful mother-in-law didn't notice our mood, and it seemed like she wouldn't stop talking anytime soon. Well, I went to the beach, and the ocean looked so beautiful from the room. But the sea itself was also beautiful. It was really nice. We should all go together next time. However, noticing something was off, she looked around with a puzzled expression. Speaking of which, where's my husband? The house was locked, so I thought he was here. Dad's not here. I have the keys. Bob finally responded to the mother-in-law's query, though he looked tense. What do you have the house keys? Bob? The mother-in-law asked, appearing clueless, but with a straight face. Bob replied, It's hard to explain here. Let's go home and talk. Saying this, Bob picked up the car keys and his mother-in-law's luggage and headed to the car. I nodded in agreement with Bob's words, followed him without saying anything else. Unaware of our heavy mood, the mother-in-law was still in high spirits. And perhaps still in a holiday mood. She continued to chat happily in the car. The food was amazing since we were by the sea. Most of it was seafood, but the sashimi was particularly delicious. There were so many fresh fish. I wanted you guys to see it. She continued talking nonstop all the way to the house, a trip that took less than 30 minutes by car. But listening to her in silence was tough. I couldn't stop the mother-in-law who was talking so joyfully. No, that's not it. I just didn't have the energy. Then, equally silent till now, an annoyed Bob finally spoke up. Mom, can you keep it down a bit? Exodus rituals. I'm trying to drive here. Hearing Bob's words, she pouted like a child and began to talk back. What? I'm just trying to keep the mood light since you're driving in the dark. Catherine isn't saying anything either. What's wrong with enjoying a drive? I was left speechless out of exasperation. Bob, probably feeling the same way, let out a deep sigh. However, unable to bear it any longer, he shouted, Mom, just be quiet. I don't want to hear your stories right now. The mother-in-law looked genuinely shocked at Bob's tone. And then with a puzzled look on her face, she began to speak. Why are you so angry? Just trying to concentrate on driving. Please, just be quiet for now. Perhaps understanding. The mother-in-law finally fell silent. We then spent the rest of the trip in silence. A few minutes later, we finally arrived at the family home. And as Bob unlocked the front door, he entered the house. I'm home. It feels good to be back. There's no place like home, the mother-in-law said, relieved as soon as she entered the house. But when the lights turned on, she noticed something was amiss. She quietly began to speak. Wait, where is he? He wasn't at your place either. Saying this, she called out for her husband multiple times. But there was no response, and the mother-in-law came up with an optimistic theory. He's probably mad because I went on the trip without consulting him. He must have gone on a solo trip out of anger. That's why you guys couldn't tell me, right? I was growing tired of her cheerful assumptions, and I wondered how she could come up with such ideas. At that point, an exasperated Bob responded, Dad went on a long trip by himself. See? That's when's he coming back? She asked Bob without a hint of doubt in her voice. I couldn't stay silent any longer and tried to steady myself before speaking. He's not coming back. What do you mean? Is he that mad? Realizing she still didn't grasp the situation, I led her to a specific room. As she entered, she stood in shock and disbelief. Is this some kind of joke? It's not a joke. We've already held Dad's funeral. The mother-in-law, now grasping the gravity of the situation, asked what had happened. He was in a car accident, I replied, tears forming in my eyes. But Bob's words, my mother-in-law began to recall and speak. There was that car accident. Remember, Catherine's dad was rushed to the hospital. And on that day, wasn't your father here too? After that, my dad woke up. He's still hospitalized though. Hearing my words, my mother-in-law seemed lost and held her head, saying she didn't understand. I then explained what happened afterward. On the day my dad was taken to the hospital, my father-in-law accompanied him. I was by my unconscious father's side, taking care of him all the time. Concerned about my father and me, my father-in-law visited us daily. And a few days later, when my dad finally woke up, both my father-in-law and I were overjoyed. We had plans to go out for drinks once he was discharged. But then, on our way back, I tried to speak calmly, but I was overwhelmed with emotion and couldn't continue. Bob took over for me. Dad was apparently taken to the same hospital as Catherine's father. Catherine saw him being brought in by ambulance by chance and let me know. I rushed there immediately, but it was already too late. Why? Why did that happen? My mother-in-law, taken aback by our story, seemed lost for words. However, a visibly distressed Bob quickly changed his demeanor and spoke up. What were you doing all that time? Wait, Mom, I tried contacting you multiple times. I had no idea things had gotten this bad. My mother-in-law looked baffled by Bob's questioning. Seeing her like this, Bob's expression remained unchanged. We get it. No one expected this to happen. That's right, isn't it? We're all in the same boat, right? But as my mother-in-law tried to reason, Bob stared her down. Then tell me, why was your cell phone off? What? I mean, hearing Bob's words, the mother-in-law turned pale. Yet, undeterred by her reaction, Bob continued speaking. I kept calling, but your phone was always off. And when I finally thought I got through, no answer. You didn't even call back. What's that about? My mother-in-law was at a loss for words, and she stayed silent. But Bob wasn't finished. Why didn't you tell us you were going on a trip in advance? Who are you planning to go with? At least tell us where you're headed. Sure, you're an adult and don't need to tell us everything, but we would have liked to know, especially given what happened. Bob shared our feelings on the matter. Upon hearing this, my mother-in-law responded, I went on a trip with a friend. But as far as I know, I contacted all your friends. I'm right, none of them were with you. They even said they didn't know where you went. Bob kept pressing for answers. I've made new friends recently, friends you don't know about. She seemed determined to counter Bob's accusations, but Bob wasn't backing down. Is this him? Bob asked, showing her a photo of a man walking arm in arm with my mother-in-law. Seeing the picture, her face went pale. He's just a drinking buddy, not the one I traveled with. If Kim, Bob replied with a meaningful tone. Seems like you're quite close for just a drinking buddy. Resture. There's nothing between us. Sure, we're close, but not in the way you're implying. By the act. You think we don't know? Even my dad knew. Not able to hold back his frustration with his evasive mother, Bob finally raised his voice. Do you still deny anything with him, even after seeing this? Bob thrust another photo at her, showing the two of them entering a hotel. That the sight made her shiver. Why? Why do you have this? It seemed that my mother-in-law realized she couldn't deny it any longer and timidly asked. I found a diary when I was going through Dad's belongings. It was inside. Bob calmly began to explain. He told her about the diary and how it mentioned the person in the photograph. His dad had known for quite some time that his wife had been having an affair, but never confronted her. In fact, the diary even mentioned that he felt he was the one to blame. Dad's diary didn't blame you or say a single bad thing about you, Bob said. I'm so sorry. I did go on a trip with him. I never thought it would lead to this. I'm truly sorry. She apologized with tears in her eyes after understanding the gravity of her actions. I'm sorry to both of you. Please forgive me. I will never see him again and I'll change my ways. The mother-in-law pleaded while crying. However, Bob replied firmly, even if Dad forgave you, I will never. Hearing this, the mother-in-law collapsed on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Yet, we left her there and exited the house. Later, Bob told us about a local bar that was mentioned in his father's diary. He went there and discreetly asked around. Apparently, the mother-in-law hadn't been meeting with the man. She's been meeting with the man she traveled with. They had both been hiding the fact that they were married and decided to part ways without any arguments. However, neighbors and friends found out about her affair and the fact she skipped her husband's funeral for a romantic getaway. They shunned her, and this hurt led her to sell her house and move away. On my end, I still struggled to cope with my father-in-law's passing, but my spirits were lifted when my dad got discharged from the hospital. We reminisce about my father-in-law almost daily. I'm gonna go out for a drink soon. I had promised Bob's dad we'd have a drink together after he got better, so I'll bring his photo along. My dad said cheerfully, please ensure you're fully healed before you go out. We don't want you sleeping just anywhere. Bob responded with concern. Nah, I'm fine. I'm not gonna sleep just anywhere with Bob's dad's photo. He chuckled, not taking my plea seriously. Yet he looked genuinely happy. To be honest, I hadn't found much to smile about since my father-in-law passed away. But lately, I found myself laughing a bit more, probably due to these light-hearted conversations. There's another piece of joyous news too. I'm pregnant, and as I want my father-in-law to rest in peace, I aim to regain my happiness bit by bit. I can't remain sad forever, especially now that I have a child on the way. How dare you? Did those words from my mother-in-law. I was kicked out of the house. My mother-in-law, Patricia, had been injured and was urgently taken to the hospital. I had rushed there with my husband, Smark, only to be suddenly confronted with such an accusation. All eyes, including those of my husband and father-in-law named Bill, turned to me, and so, I was expelled from the family for an unfounded crime. But I had no memory of doing anything wrong. Later, with advice from a certain individual, I realized there was a shocking truth about Patricia. My name is Sarah. I'm a 37-year-old housewife. I've been a housewife since I got married to Mark 10 years ago. I don't have many friends, so I mostly stay at home. Mark and I have been dating since college and decided to get married a while after we both started working. A few years back, we started living with my father-in-law Bill and mother-in-law Patricia. Originally, we wanted to have kids and decided against living together considering the kids. But we found out we had trouble conceiving. We tried infertility treatments desperately, but couldn't have a child. Continuing the treatments would not only be expensive but also mentally stressful, so we decided not to have children. That's when talks about living with my in-laws began. Honestly, I wasn't too keen on the idea, but my in-laws didn't seem like bad people, so I thought maybe living with them might be okay. We began living together on the condition that Mark would always have my back. Considering the age of Patricia and Bill, I handled most of the household chores. I'd wake up at 5 a.m., adjusting to their schedule, and make breakfast. Lunch was made according to their individual schedules. I did the cleaning daily, and sometimes even drove them to the hospital when I had some spare time. I did my best for my in-laws, and I thought our relationship wasn't that bad. But one day, I overheard a conversation between Patricia and Bill. That day, I had plans to have lunch with a friend, so I made lunch for my in-laws early and left the house. I was enjoying lunch at a cafe with my friend, but she had to leave early because her daughter got a fever. As a result, I ended up parting ways with my friend a few hours earlier than we had originally planned. I thought about making a detour somewhere, but I just did my grocery shopping for dinner and headed straight home. I figured my elderly in-laws would feel more at ease if I was home. After finishing shopping, I opened the front door and headed for the living room. There's a hallway leading to the living room, and my in-laws' bedroom is off of it. I heard them conversing as I walked by. They usually keep their door completely shut, but that day it was slightly ajar, allowing their conversation to filter out. I wasn't initially curious about their conversation, but the moment I was about to walk past, I heard my name. Intrigued, I wanted to know what they were discussing, just leaning close to the door. I was met with a barrage of shocking words. Sarah's out having lunch with her friend again. She did the same just recently. Despite being a full-time homemaker, she lives a carefree life. Without Mark, she wouldn't be able to maintain that lifestyle. Well, maybe Sarah just needs a break every once in a while. But I do feel it's unfair. We can't dine out because of our health, yet she goes out all the time on own. Exactly. Why didn't he marry her? I wished he married the one he was dating before. Besides, Sarah has a rather unrefined side. Her cooking isn't great either. I discovered that especially my mother-in-law had a negative perception of me. I had never heard such comments directly, and Mark had never mentioned that his parents disliked me. So this was my first time realizing that they did. Knowing they disliked me made interactions with them somewhat awkward. Of course, I continued with my usual chores and tasks, but the conversations between us started dwindling. It was hard to confide in Mark, and if I did, confronting the in-laws would likely lead to denial, making my case harder. As I pondered what to do next, things took a worse turn. My mother-in-law's cherished necklace went missing, and shockingly, she blamed it on me. She demanded a search of my room and to prove my innocence. I complied, though I was certain I hadn't taken it. Patricia's necklace mysteriously emerged from a drawer containing my jewelry. See, I knew it was her. She always eyed my necklace with envy. I bet she's taken other things too. What else would that? Mark and my father-in-law frantically searched my room. In the end, only the necklace was found. I was left standing in the middle of the room, feeling ostracized. And from that day on, I was treated like a thief, distanced by the family. They wouldn't listen to any of my explanations. To make matters worse, my mother-in-law was spreading nasty rumors about me throughout the neighborhood. The woman stole my necklace. Can you believe it? And she keeps denying it, even though it was found in her room. Given the talk, every time I left the house, I was met with cold stares. Life went on this way for a while, and being home became increasingly uncomfortable. Usually, I would stay home, engage in my hobby of crafting, and converse with my in-laws. However, lately, I had been spending more time outside. After preparing breakfast for the in-laws in the morning, I would head out. I'd kill time at diners or comic book stores until Mark returned from work. One day, I received a call from Mark informing me that his mother had been urgently hospitalized. Where are you? Mom fell down some stairs at a pedestrian bridge and got injured. Please come to the nearest hospital from the house. Ed and I will be with Mom, Mark said hurriedly before hanging up. I happened to be close to the hospital at that moment, so it only took me about 5 minutes to get there on foot. After quickly finishing up some errands, I walked briskly to the hospital where I heard my mother-in-law had been taken. I asked a nurse which room she was in, and as I headed to the room, I had an ominous feeling. When I opened the door, everyone present turned to look at me simultaneously. Their gazes were sharp and hostile, like they were looking at a villain. I thought my bad feeling might be right. Then, my mother-in-law pointed at me and shouted, "How dare you?" When I asked what was going on, she exclaimed, "Don't play dumb. You pushed me down the stairs." When I was walking over the pedestrian bridge near the house, I felt someone push me from behind. It hurt so much when I fell, but with the last of my strength. I looked up, and there you were. You vanished before others gathered, but I'm sure it was you. No, I didn't. I tried to explain that it wasn't me, but my husband and father-in-law interrupted. "I never thought you'd be capable of such a thing. Just leave our home." I agree. This is for the best. You two had issues before. It's better if you live separately. That's right. Just leave. And you're not family. And Mark, you should divorce her. Yeah, I'm going to, Hart said. Without being able to defend myself, it was decided that we would divorce, and I would be ousted from the family. Leaving the hospital before my husband and father-in-law, I felt lost. I never imagined things would turn out this way, and my parents live far away. It would take a lot of effort to move my belongings there. Moreover, my parents were strict, and I didn't know what they'd say if I told them I was divorcing. However, at that moment, I felt they were the only ones I could rely on. On my way home from the hospital, I called my mother. "I'm sorry. I'm gonna get a divorce, and I want to come back for a while. Is that okay?" Just hearing the tone of my voice, my mother sensed something was wrong. "Okay, I understand. I'll tell your father. Just pack what you can for tomorrow. We'll rent a large vehicle and come over." When I got home, I packed my belongings as my mother instructed. I couldn't take everything, so I left the furniture. I packed my clothes, accessories, and mementos in boxes. I came across a photo of me and my husband. I wasn't sure if I should keep it. I loved him, and I thought we could have lived happily together if it weren't for this incident. But I knew there was no going back. I'm sure he'll contact a divorce lawyer by tomorrow, and I've decided to throw away all the pictures of my husband once and for all. The next day, my parents came over in a large truck that could carry all my stuff. It was a long time no see. "You probably didn't sleep well last night. I'll drive, so you just rest in the car." And my father drove the long 6-hour journey by himself. My father had told me to get some sleep, but tears streamed down my face in the back seat, overwhelmed by my parents' kindness. I wasn't sure if they noticed or not, but they, sitting in the front, didn't say a word to me. After about 3 hours, my parents and I made it back home safely. "I know you're tired, but could you tell me a bit more about what happened? You haven't done anything wrong, right? Given the situation, there's a chance you could be arrested, so I really want you to tell me everything." My parents asked, looking for more details. I explained that I was suspected of stealing my mother-in-law's necklace, and now was being accused. I was being accused of pushing her down the stairs. That's a lie, right? Why would anyone make up such a story? I think someone either wanted to harass you, or they had something to hide. Those are the only two options I see. Something to hide. Maybe someone who shouldn't have been there was present, and Patricia got seriously injured by accident. So they're trying to blame it on Sarah to cover it up. Maybe what my father said made sense. But I'd always thought such things only happened in TV shows or movies. No official complaint was made, and I just wanted to get a peaceful divorce. However, it seemed my parents thought otherwise. Well, it made sense. If their only daughter was being framed, they'd naturally want to prove her innocence. Maybe we should do a bit more investigation. I'll also reach out to some folks I know. Considering my parents' advice, I decided to look deeper into the matter. Just as I was about to look into the situation in detail, divorce papers from my husband's attorney were mailed to my parents' house. I thought having the divorce papers in front of me might make me reconsider. But to my surprise, I realized my feelings for my ex-husband Mark were gone, probably because he had never supported me every time and through various events. I just didn't love Mark anymore. Having finally cut ties with Mark and both his parents, I began to seriously investigate the incident. Patricia, who used to be my mother-in-law, doesn't seem to have filed a complaint, and it appears the police and hospital staff find it a bit suspicious. Given the fuss she made, everyone probably expected her to file a complaint. Digging deeper would be quite a hassle. So, I decided to seek help from my father. He used to work for the NYPD, so he has many connections within the force. He was able to arrange for me to view the security footage from the nearby cameras Security cameras don't store footage for very long, but thankfully, the footage around the staircase where Patricia was allegedly pushed was still available. And examining the footage closely, it was clear that Patricia was indeed pushed down the stairs. However, no matter how much they zoomed in, it wasn't meaning. To further solidify my alibi, I checked the footage from where I was at the same time. It showed me taking care of some business. This proved my innocence. Turns out, when I got the call about Patricia's accident, I was at a different hospital, having endured more than my fair share of harassment from Patricia and her group. I've been visiting a psychiatrist. That day, I had an appointment, and the footage showed me leaving the psychiatrist's office. This confirmed I wasn't to blame, but I wasn't gonna let it end there. I clear my name from all the humiliation I'd suffered. I chose to confront Patricia and her group head-on. I brought an attorney with me and headed to Mark's house. After consulting with an attorney, it turned out that due to the emotional distress I suffered, I might be able to claim compensation. At home there were Mark, Patricia, and Bill, my ex-father-in-law, all staring at us with puzzled looks. Who's that guy? Why bring someone like that here now? I said I wouldn't press charges, so you should be grateful. In response to Patricia, the attorney presented a document. What's this? The document stated that I was not the cause of Patricia's injury, and that someone else had pushed her down the stairs. I apologize for the late introduction. I am Sarah's attorney. As mentioned in this document, Sarah was somewhere else on the day you testified that she was pushed down the stairs. Of course, we've already verified the truth with security camera footage. If you'd like, I can show you the footage. And there was another person visible, near the stairs besides you. The trick in it. When the attorney explained that much, Patricia quickly pulled the document towards herself. What the heck is this? Just when I thought you'd suddenly show up, this is all in the past. I said I'd forgive you, so please don't bring it up anymore. Patricia was clearly panicking. Both Mark and Bill seemed suspicious. Why are you so flustered? If Mom didn't do anything wrong, you should be confident about it. That's right. We're on Patricia's side, after all. Despite their reassuring words, Patricia's face grew paler. Aren't you too curious about who pushed Patricia down the stairs? I do wonder. Who was it? Who would do such a thing to my dear wife? Go and forgive them. Will, hold on a sec. Ignoring Patricia's attempt to stop me, I continued. What was Patricia's affair partner? Your partner? Patricia had been infatuated with a man for some time. That man was a bartender, and Patricia had gone into debt just to lavish money on him. However, no matter how much money she gave him, he never truly belonged to her. Frustrated, Patricia confronted him. That confrontation took place at the top of those stairs. Even though Patricia didn't own the man, reports indicate that there was a physical relationship between them. It seems Patricia was waiting for the man to leave the bartender job, but he showed no signs of leaving and often went out with other customers. The man had always seen Patricia as a troublesome client, and in a fit of anger, he allegedly pushed her down the stairs. Realizing the gravity of his actions, the man tried to help Patricia, but she said, "It's okay. We'll say my daughter-in-law did this. You should go home." Be unable to approach the police for this particular investigation, they had no choice but to hire a private investigator. Pictures capturing the two are clear, and there's no way to deny it. Upon presenting the evidence to the police, an immediate investigation was launched, and the man was arrested. During interrogation, he confessed everything that transpired between him and Patricia on the staircase. Tell me it's a lie. Please say it isn't true. Cheating, huh? You're the worst. Realizing there's no escaping the truth, Patricia immediately began to apologize. I'm sorry. I was just so lonely. What do you mean lonely? I've always been there for you. We're getting a divorce. I don't want to hear any excuses. Upon being exposed, Patricia faced an immediate decision of divorce. Though she tried desperately to salvage her relationship with Bill, he was too enraged to listen. Mark, too, was shocked to learn of his mother's infidelity and looked at Patricia with disgust. Moreover, the amount of debt Patricia accumulated to lavish the man was several $100,000, an amount she couldn't possibly repay with her pension alone. Patricia wasn't the type to save money, so repaying the debt would likely take a significant amount of time. She begged Mark for help, but he snapped back. Are you kidding me? Because of your lies, I divorced Sarah. I'm not giving you a single dime for the money you borrowed for your lover. In the end, Patricia faced both a divorce and being disowned by Mark. unable to repay the money and left without a place to stay. Patricia had no choice but to sadly return to her own home, thought to pay off the debt as soon as possible. It seems that Patricia's elder brother, who took over the family house, has taken on the responsibility. However, she'll be isolated until she repays all the money to him. Patricia can't just go outside as she pleases, and she doesn't have any money to spend freely. When Patricia receives her pension, it's all ordered to be given to her brother. I bet she regrets mingling with that bar and harassing me. I haven't seen Patricia since then, but apparently, the once youthful-looking Patricia has aged considerably. And for me, having been mentally tormented by those three on a daily basis, I managed to get a small amount in damages. From a certain point, whenever I spoke to those three, I always made sure to have a voice recorder on, so I had more than enough evidence when claiming for damages. Later on, I received numerous messages and voicemails from Mark expressing his wish to reconcile, but I'm not gonna get back with Mark. Even though he had promised to always be on my side when we moved in together, just thinking of being with Mark, who couldn't even keep that single promise. Keep that single promise gives me the creeps. I'm sure if we were together in the future, I'll find more unpleasant things about him, and in the end, I'd be the one getting hurt. It seems Mark and Bill are living together, but with Patricia and I gone, their house is said to be filled with a cold atmosphere. Bill isn't very strong health-wise, so he needs regular hospital visits. Mark juggles his job and housework while also driving Bill to and from the hospital. It must be quite tough for him. I get diary-like messages from him every day about his daily struggles, but I usually send them straight to the trash without reading all of them. Since divorcing Mark, I've been enjoying my single life. I've successfully found a new job and I became a beauty advisor, something I've always wanted to be. Up until now, I was always occupied with looking after Mark and my in-laws, so my own beauty regimen was always on the back burner. During a time when I was away from my in-laws, I once visited a department store's cosmetics section. I received advice on how to enhance my beauty and was told how to be more confident. That was the first time in my life I felt so confident, and I believe the beauty advisor at that time played a huge role in making me who I am today. That's why I decided to pursue a career as a beauty advisor, hoping to inspire others the way I was inspired. Although the job involves many behind-the-scenes tasks and challenges, I find it fulfilling. Thankfully, since becoming a beauty advisor, I've received many compliments on my appearance. I've started to attract attention from men. A while back, a man approached me at a cafe, and we've been on several dates since. Just the other day, after confessing his feelings, we officially started dating. He knows I'm divorced, and even after knowing my past, he expressed his feelings for me. As unlike Mark, he's always supportive, and he's the first one to lend a hand when I'm in need. It's been 3 years since my divorce from Mark, and I'll soon turn 40. Thus lately, I've been pondering if remarrying wouldn't be such a bad idea. But first and foremost, I want to be someone I'm proud of and want to continue improving myself. I genuinely wish that women with feelings like mine would be more confident and speak up without fear.